Hello everyone, my name is Nigel Gwilliam, Director of Media Affairs at the IPA. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the IPA is the professional body for advertising, media and marketing communications agencies based in the United Kingdom. I'm delighted to introduce this session on our climate charter and its carbon calculator for media plans. I'd like to begin by quoting IPA President Julian Douglas. "The science is clear. We need to turn fast and hard if we are to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees and mitigate the worst effects of the climate crisis. This requires every single one of us to respond and transition, but we can't succeed acting alone. We need fully committed, industry-wide coalitions that drive the change we need to see. The IPA Media Climate Charter is a response to that challenge for collective action." Well said, Dougie. This charter was conceived to provide media agencies with the tools and resources to support their transition to a zero-carbon future. It offers a pathway for them to demonstrate their commitment and action in response to the climate crisis. It's an integral part of the Ad Net Zero initiative and addresses one of the 5 core Ad Net Zero actions. Action 3, to curb emissions from media planning, buying and distribution. We launched it in June of this year following development by the IPA Media Climate Action Group, which is made up of sustainability leads from participating media agencies. The Action Group continues to refine and develop both charter and calculator, but it's worth noting that even at launch, signatory agencies collectively accounted for over £7 billion in 2020 UK media billings. One of the core tools of the Charter is the carbon calculator for media plans. This allows the industry to measure the overall carbon footprint of the campaigns that media agencies plan and buy for clients across all channels, providing a platform for reduction and offsetting. But the calculator is just one element of the Charter, which is offering tools and resources for media agencies, delivers for clients, and welcomes collaboration with media owners. So without further delay, I will now hand over to IPA Media Climate Action Group representatives, Pauline Robson and Jack Monaghan, to hear more about the Media Climate Charter and its carbon calculator for media plans.
Thanks, Nigel. I'm Jack Monaghan. I work for Rapport and IPG Media Brands, and I'm here today with the fantastic Pauline Robson from MediaCom. We're both here on behalf of the IPA Media Climate Action Group. Today, we're going to be taking through the work of the group over the past 18 months, from its inception back in early 2020 to the launch of the Climate Charter in June this year, and outlining some of our future ambitions and responsibilities going forward. From previous sessions, you'll likely be quite familiar with Ad Net Zero, the UK ad industry initiative with the ambition of driving the industry to real net zero by 2030. Now, there are 5 main action areas which are outlined from the outset, spanning everything from the operational emissions of advertising businesses and those arising from the advertising process to the influence advertising actually has on consumer behaviour. Ahead of the publication of the Ad Net Zero report and recommendations, a media agency subgroup was formed, tasked with outlining the industry's recommendation for Action Point 3, curbing media emissions. 8 of us from a variety of agencies came together, meeting only once in person before being landed with a second challenging task: navigating the world of cross-agency teams meetings and groups, something which we've still not quite cracked. Now, whilst Action Points 2 and 5 focus on the creative production and consumer influence of advertising, Action Point 3 is ultimately about reducing the direct and indirect emissions and impacts of the physical media we plan and buy. We therefore started by identifying 3 key initial areas that we felt were necessary to address in order to begin curbing these emissions. Firstly, we needed to be able to measure and calculate these media emissions in the first instance. Not only is this important for understanding the total impact of the industry, but this is a necessary step ahead of scoping out ways for agencies to play a role in actually reducing them. Secondly, we wanted to empower agencies and planners with the information that enables them to make informed choices around the media owners they partner with on behalf of clients. Finally, we wanted to ensure that the media we plan and buy isn't inadvertently funding and contributing to the dissemination of climate change, misinformation and denial content. We recognised immediately that work was already being done to address these three areas across our agencies and the wider industry. Now, not only would the duplication of our efforts be a waste of resource and time that we ultimately can't afford to waste, but duplication also comes with the dangers of having different measurement standards in place across the industry, two things we were keen to avoid through an approach of collective action. We therefore recognised there was an opportunity here to develop an industry charter that would accelerate media agencies' response to AdNet Zero, something that would underpin and outline the foundational response of all media agencies in the UK. The charter would perform two functions. First and foremost, it would provide agencies with the tools and resources needed to address Action Point 3 and begin curbing media emissions. In line with these three initial action areas, the Charter would provide agencies with a showcase of media and sustainability credentials, brand safety guidelines, and the media carbon calculator, which Pauline will take you through in more detail shortly. Secondly, however, we saw an opportunity for the Charter to accelerate the delivery of the wider AdNet Zero ambitions across the media agency landscape. Now, as is the case across the wider advertising ecosystem, media agencies are all at very different stages of the journey. We felt that many would really benefit from receiving advice on how to address the 5 AdNet Zero action points, but with advice tailored specifically to them as media agencies. We knew that some agencies would certainly appreciate guidance on how to begin monitoring and addressing their operational emissions, but we also wanted to empower agencies to progress the conversation, progress the focus beyond just operational emissions and towards how they might look to work with and alongside initiatives such as Ad Green and Change the Brief, going beyond just the immediate agency operations and output. It's important to quickly discuss the support and resources provided to us by the IPA, essentially laying the foundations upon which we will be able to collaborate as a cross-agency group and ultimately launch the Charter. Whilst the Media Owner Showcase was something we would have to develop as a group, MediaCom and Group M had already spent a lot of time and resources developing the carbon calculator, a tool which they would be generously opening up to members of the Charter. However, there was a need for solid and independent governance. Not only would we be sharing IP amongst ourselves, but also potentially sensitive data and knowledge throughout the wider group. We would also need an independent means of collecting and controlling the funds that Charter members would provide, funds that we would use to develop the carbon calculator into a web-based tool and launch the Charter online. Step forward, the IPA and the Media Futures Group, with representation from the top agency groups and independents across the country. By working with the IPA and the Media Futures Group, we would ensure that we would have top-level buy-in and support from the very start. We would also be able to lean on the reputation of the IPA, effectively communicating the group and Charter's values of cross-agency collaboration and collective action. And last but not least, we would also be able to access the resources required to develop, launch and manage the Charter. An online Charter whose tools and resources would be easily accessible to the vast majority of media agencies in the UK, hosted on the IPA's website. So, with the support of the IPA and the Media Futures Group, in June this year we were able to launch the IPA Media Climate Charter. We are already up to 23 different agency members, accounting for over £7 billion of media billings in 2020, and with much more room for growth. I'll now pass you over to Pauline, who will take you through the main tools and resources provided by the Charter.
Thank you, Jack. Now, as Jack and Nigel have mentioned, the Media Climate Charter has been set up to address Action Point 3 of AdNet Zero, around curbing emissions from media. So the tools and the resources that sit within the Charter are particularly focused towards and relevant to media agencies. Now, some of these overlap with the wider AdNet Zero actions and resources, but there are 3 distinct areas that are the specific focus of media agencies that I'm going to talk a bit about. So the first of these is brand safety around climate change denial, misinformation and disinformation. The proliferation of climate change denial is a serious challenge in the face of the climate and biodiversity emergency. Now, while some publishers have attempted to combat climate mis- and disinformation by reviewing their policies, other news outlets rely on controversial and sensational headlines and articles for traffic, and they haven't adopted the same practices. And there's a growing wealth of content that sits outside of traditional publishers, particularly within social media platforms, where initiatives aimed at decreasing the prominence of misinformation and conspiracy theories haven't seemed to address climate change denial. So the ambition of the Charter is that agencies no longer facilitate the funding of climate change denial content. This includes putting measures in place to avoid agencies doing so inadvertently. In order to achieve this, the Charter recommends that all member agencies actively adhere to the Conscious Advertising Network's principles around misinformation and disinformation, specifically as it relates to climate change denial combat. The Charter website shows useful resources around climate change disinformation. It has exclusion list information and provides a link to the Changing the Narrative report from the Conscious Advertising Network and the Media Bounty, which brilliantly explains and breaks down the issue and provides guidelines for how advertisers and agencies can combat it. The second area is the Media Owner Showcase. Now, as media agencies, we are increasingly being asked by our clients to identify media partners that are in line with their own sustainability goals and commitments. Now, at the moment, this is particularly the case when clients are running sustainability-focused campaigns. But as they move towards emissions reductions across their entire value and supply chain, this ask will become increasingly common across all campaigns for many clients. So, as part of the Charter, we want to make it easy for agencies to assess and access the sustainability commitments and plans of our media partners so that they can start to make climate-positive planning decisions. In order to do that, our ambition is to build a cross-industry media owner sustainability database, which will highlight the steps that our key partners are taking towards becoming more sustainable, sharing inspiring case studies and generally increasing the visibility of the great work that's happening in this space. We're very much at the start of this process. Currently, the showcase links to media owners' sustainability commitments on their websites, but we are developing a more in-depth and comprehensive sustainable media showcase. Now, our ambition is that the showcase will support the media industry's transition to a carbon zero future in several ways. Firstly, by encouraging greater transparency around the carbon impact of media buying. Secondly, by enabling media planners to develop lower carbon media plans through a better understanding of what different media owners are doing to reduce their own emissions. And finally, by surfacing and sharing really inspiring sustainable campaigns and green media opportunities, which will make it much easier for planners to put this into practice in their work. The third area of focus is the Media Carbon Calculator. Now, this is really the first step in helping us to understand the impact of our wider work as media agencies by calculating the emissions associated with a media plan. And the reason this is important is that WPP's latest sustainability report shows that 55% of Scope 3 emissions from the group came from media placement. So if you multiply that out across the whole industry, actually addressing this is really crucial in us being able to meet our own net zero commitments as an industry and in us helping our clients to meet theirs. The calculator works at a channel level, and currently it's primarily focused on the end delivery of an ad. So, for example, the emissions of viewing an ad on a screen or on a device.
To get started, go to the Channels tab and select the channels on your plan. Once you have them all selected, you can move on to the calculator screen where you can input details of your plan. Please read the page on how to use the IPA Media Calculator here when inputting details of your plan into the calculator. It will provide some important guidance on how to do this. Add the details of your plan into the fields provided. In some cases, you have the option to add in your own custom formats using the drop-down menu. When all the details of your plan are in, hit the Calculate button. This will calculate the overall carbon footprint of the campaign. You can then visit the results page to see the results. The overall footprint of the campaign is highlighted in tonnes of CO2 equivalent. The calculator provides an illustration of how much it would cost to offset the campaign to make it carbon neutral. The Assumptions and Data Sources page outlines what's included in the calculation. Please read the limitations of use too. You can print off or export your plan via a CSV file. The calculator is the first step to helping us understand the wider impact of our work.
So that's a very quick tour of the calculator. It's important to say here that this is very much a first step. It's the first iteration of this calculator, and there are some limitations in terms of what we can do with it at present. There are gaps in the data, particularly when it comes to understanding the full impact of the digital media supply chain, which isn't currently included in the calculation. And it doesn't have individual media owner data within the calculations. Now, we know that some media owners are further along this journey than others, and we want to be able to reflect this when calculating the emissions from a plan. So for this reason, we are currently suggesting that the calculator is used for assessing the overall impact of a plan rather than for optimization and for emissions reduction. It does allow clients to offset the impact of their plan should they wish to. Now, we know that offsets aren't the best solution here, and we recognise that we need to move towards reduction, but this is very much a first step and an interim measure on that journey. So that's an overview of the Charter and of the carbon calculator. But what's next? Well, the role of the IPA Media Climate Action Group has changed over time. Now, in the early days, we were much more focused on creating and launching the Charter. Now that the Charter's launched, the team is working in a different way. The Action Group has expanded to include representatives from all of the agencies that have signed up to the Charter, which is currently 23 agencies from across the UK, which is brilliant. We're now much more focused on how the Charter adapts and evolves to meet the needs of the industry and its member agencies. Now, this means ongoing updates and development of the tools and the resources that sit within it. So one of the tasks that we have been set as an action group is working out media emissions for the whole industry and how we might approach this. We're also looking at how we further develop and refine the carbon calculator for media plans. We know that what we have at the moment isn't perfect. It's very much a first step, and we will look to improve the data and the calculation method so that the calculator can be used to inform reductions in the emissions from media plans. Within the wider action group, we've created smaller working groups to deliver on our key areas of focus. So as well as measurement and refining the calculator, these include developing the media owner showcase, creating wider industry communications, and really ensuring that we're future facing by identifying those future projects and research that will be needed to help the industry accelerate towards net zero. We are really at the very start of this journey as a group. This is a relatively new space for our industry, and it's important to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. We're very much learning as we go. Some of these questions that we are thinking about are quite big ones. How do we reduce emissions from media without reducing ad spend? There are areas such as better targeting, reducing wastage that can all help here. And as we develop the carbon calculator and as our media partners start to progress along their own net zero journeys, understanding how we do this will start to become easier. This brings me to my next point, actually, which is around how we as a working group can work better with media partners. As Nigel mentioned in his introduction, we really welcome media owner engagement in this initiative. Our ability to deliver on our ambitions as a charter just can't happen without us working in collaboration with them. And what do we do in the meantime? So we have an interim solution in terms of being able to offset the emissions associated with a plan, but we know this isn't a satisfactory solution and that we need to move towards reduction. How can we start to move away from this as quickly as possible? As I said, we're learning as we go, and I'm now going to hand back to Jack, who will share some of the learnings from the group.
Thanks, Pauline. So, what have we learned through our work over the past 18 months? Well, firstly, and as Pauline just said, collaboration is vital across all levels. It needs to involve and engage with the entire advertising ecosystem, from agencies to media owners, trade bodies to individuals. The ongoing participation, consultation and engagement of all corners and levels of the industry ensures that initiatives such as the Charter and tools like the calculator within it are effective but also able to evolve to meet the changing needs and challenges that we're going to meet in the next few years. The second point is about competition, or rather looking beyond it. This is a bigger than self challenge and requires collective action. Learning as we go. As Pauline has just outlined, there are a lot of big questions still to be asked and answered. It's a new area for us all, and it's been amazing to see how quickly the conversation evolves, both in our group, but also with those in our respective agencies. And there's certainly an increasing appetite for this kind of work. Many clients are looking to engage with agencies on this topic, challenging them to reduce the environmental impact of their media investment, but also their wider communications approach. We, both as agencies and as an industry action group, need to evolve to meet these changing needs. As an industry, but also as powerful individuals within it, we all need to try and broaden the scope of our actions and push for further lasting progress, not shying away from, but rather actively engaging with some of the more difficult topics in this space. As a progressive industry, we ought to make sure that change comes from us rather than wait until it comes to us. So, the final one is to just get started and just get involved, really. And how do you do that? How can you get involved and engage with either the Charter or some of the wider AdNet Zero work? Well, in the UK, it's fairly simple. If you're a client or creative agency that would like to find out more about the Charter or the carbon calculator, then reach out to your media agency and look to get these practices embedded within your relationships. If you're a media agency and you're not yet signed up to the Charter, get in touch with Nigel at the IPA and sign up. We would love to get you signed up and on the group. Finally, if you're a media owner or trade association who would like to find out more about AdNet Zero or the work we do as part of the Charter, reach out to either the Ad Association or the IPA. For those in the audience who aren't based in the UK and don't currently have an industry-wide initiative set up in your market, we really encourage you to reach out to your local trade association to try and get one set up. As mentioned before, collaboration and collective action is key here. And to that point, find other people in either your own or other agencies and companies who have started or are interested in exploring this area. We have so much to learn from working with each other, sharing ideas on how to address the problems we face. And one thing we found is that there are already so many separate pockets within organisations that just need to be linked up. If you haven't already, just get started. Thank you very much for your time today. It's been great to get the opportunity for Nigel, Pauline and myself to share the work the group has been doing over the past 2 years. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat if you haven't already, and we'll get back to you shortly after the sessions. We hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.